In the past 2 months, during negotiations regarding a possible end to Russia's war against Ukraine, Russian military casualties on the front lines have not decreased. On the contrary, they have increased even faster than before, according to the BBC Russian service. The edition reached these conclusions based on the dynamics of obituaries of Russian servicemen. Since February 2025, Russian and US officials have been holding regular negotiations on the resolution of the conflict in Ukraine. Based on publications about the fallen, the BBC attempted to analyze how these negotiations have impacted the intensity of hostilities. We used the visit of US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to Moscow on February the 11th as the starting point, the article states. Information about the deaths of soldiers does not reach their relatives immediately, and it does not appear in open sources right away, reports the BBC. An idea of the intensity of the fighting can be given by the number of obituaries published daily. The BBC concludes, in total, the Russian publication claims to have identified the names of 103,275 Russian soldiers killed during the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. What is happening is causing discontent in Russian society. Soldiers' parents, in particular, are increasingly dissatisfied with the authorities. According to the General Staff, since the beginning of the full-scale war, Russia has lost over 938,000 soldiers. Russia's territorial gains in Ukraine are slowing down dramatically. Two analyses have found continuing a pattern from 2024 at a time when both nations are trying to project strength in the face of United States-mediated negotiations aimed at ending the war. Britain's Ministry of Defense last week estimated that Russian forces seized 143 square kilometers of Ukrainian land in March, compared with 196 square kilometers in February and 326 square kilometers in January. The Institute for the Study of War, a Washington, D.C. based think tank, spotted the same trend, estimating Russian gains at 203 square kilometers in March, 354 square kilometers in February, and 427 square kilometers in January. These estimates are based on satellite imagery and geolocated open-source photography rather than claims by either side. Should this trend continue, Russian forces could come to a standstill by early summer, roughly coinciding with US President Donald Trump's self-imposed early deadline for achieving a ceasefire. Russia's diminishing returns have come even as it has greatly expanded the size of its forces from an estimated 150,000 soldiers who carried out its initial invasion in February to May 2022.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday that Ukrainian intelligence has received information that China is supplying weapons to the Russian Federation. It's not that we're surprised, but we really didn't want to see the facts that we witnessed and that I witnessed. Zelensky added during the press briefing in Kiev. I had a conversation with the Chinese leader during this war. And I asked him a direct question about weapons, and he gave me his word that he would not sell weapons and send them to Russia. But, unfortunately, we see different information now. According to Associated Press, Zelensky also stated that Ukraine will be able to talk about this matter in great detail next week.
Ми отримали нарешті інформацію, що Китай поставляє зброю Російської Федерації. І ми готові будемо говорити про це детально. На сьогодні ми маємо інформацію загальну від Служби безпеки, від розвідок про порох, артилерію. І я думаю, що ми дуже детально зможемо про це сказати наступного тижня, особливо про дані, що ми вважаємо, що представники Китаю займаються виробництвом деякої зброї на території Росії. Не те, що ви здивовані, але дійсно не хотілося бачити відповідні факти, які ми бачили, які я бачив. Тому що все ж таки була у мене розмова з китайським лідером під час цієї війни, і я ставив пряме запитання щодо зброї. Він мені дав слово, що зброю продавати і відправляти в Росію не буде. Але, на жаль, ми бачимо зараз іншу інформацію. В будь-якому випадку у нас вже є факти про цю роботу Китаю і Росії на посилення їх обороноздатності. І це погані факти.
Sumy is the only regional center that the enemy regularly shells, not only with drones and missiles, but also with barrel and rocket artillery, simply because it is located closer to the border than other cities. However, the key reason why Russia launched a missile strike on Sumy on April the 13th was to create a buffer zone, regardless of whether Putin plans to achieve any result in the negotiations or not. He has begun to implement his diabolical plan. This was stated by Ukrainian political scientist and serviceman Taras Berezovets during a conversation with Mark Figin. The Kremlin's strategy is absolutely clear. This is not just intimidation. The Russian Federation is deliberately committing war crimes against civilians in order to force them to leave the border areas. The Russians want to literally create an uninhabited grey zone several dozen kilometers wide, the analyst noted. Unfortunately, we must admit that in the near future, the enemy will concentrate its efforts on terrorizing the civilian population in the border areas, namely in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, Berezovets said. Naturally, in this regard, we are interested in the reaction of our partners, as we see a serious conflict has arisen in Trump's team, which indicates that there is a struggle between different points of view in Washington. One of them is allied with Ukraine, and the other, let's call it mildly, pragmatic. Ukrainian intelligence does not rule out that the Russians will use North Korean military personnel in their attacks on the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. This opinion was expressed by the spokesman for the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Andriy Chernyak, in an interview with the Japanese public broadcaster NHK. According to him, North Korea's losses are currently around 5,000, but another 6,000 soldiers are still in Kursk and can continue to fight. Chernyak says that after unsuccessful assaults, they changed tactics and now move in groups of 1 to 2 fighters. The GUR spokesman emphasized that now we can also talk about more successful training of the military from the DPRK. They have mastered the tactics of using unmanned aerial vehicles and electronic warfare. And now they are also fully mastering the weapons and tactics that Russia uses on the battlefield against Ukraine. GUR also stated that the language barrier between North Koreans and Russians does not cause any obstacles. Chernyak believes that the military from the DPRK fulfill their duties in assault units without even communicating with Russian soldiers.